Little pitiful, Miss Air, boss, het iron, white cut black, chameleon, gold sucking beast, steel straight woman. What's wrong with the weeds? Still able to grow into towering trees. Keywords of the novel. Journey through no slave, no pop-ups, Journey through no slave. Download the full text of Journey through no slave, and read the latest chapters of Journey through no slave. Chapter 1. Inexplicably. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Inexplicably. Damn girl, why don't you get up quickly? Your father is about to get up and lay the bed, and your sister is also about to get up. Do you want a big family to wait for you? Shenshi was sleeping soundly when suddenly her body was stirred up by a tremendous force. Shenshi felt her body take off from the hard bed and fall heavily to the ground. The feeling of weightlessness instantly woke her up. Sitting on the ground, Shenshi opened her eyes in panic. After graduating from college, she saved some money and did not give it to her parents. After the new year, she secretly asked for leave to fulfill her dream of traveling to Zizang. She was already panicked when she went out alone, and finally fell asleep on the train. She felt like she had just closed her eyes when someone lifted her blanket off the bed. At this moment, Shenshi felt a sense of panic. Perhaps her concern was right, but she was really being targeted because she was single on the road. Shenshi's mind flashed with the image of herself being dizzy and sold deep into the mountains and forests. She forced herself to calm down and hugged her legs tightly, looking at the tall and thin black figure in front of her. What do you want? There are surveillance cameras everywhere now. As she spoke, Shenshi looked around, trying to spot one or two cameras flashing red dots. The surroundings were pitch black, but it could be vaguely seen that it was an empty cabin. Shenshi's eyes turned and her heart became even more uncertain. It was actually made of wood. Now, the mountain ditch is filled with cement and red brick houses, right? Have you been sold to any primitive mountain ditch? Before Shenshi could start a more frightening association, her forehead was pressed by the tall and thin figure in front of her, and a sharp and malicious voice sounded, "Dead girl, do you pretend to be crazy again? It's no use, get up and work quickly. First go to burn a pot of hot water, your father and sister want to use it, and then heat up the congee left yesterday, and the leftovers will be given to you. Your father hates this, and you hurry to cook a plate of food for your father." He spoke a lot with a crackling sound. Shenshi was both confused and frightened, but her body was unconsciously dominated by the fierce nagging of the woman in front of her who couldn't see clearly. She instinctively rushed out of the door and came to the kitchen, familiar with the way, skillfully squatting down to start a fire. Just like this, the sharp voice of the woman behind her didn't stop, but was still chattering incessantly, "Can't you wear your shoes properly? If they drag and break, no one will buy you a new one. And this bed. After finishing dinner, fold it up. There's no girl like you. I've given birth to 4 children in my generation, so there's no one as worried as you." Shenshi, who was squatting in front of the stove, listened to the huge noise that was comparable to a plane landing. Her eyes blurred at some point, and she blinked. It turned out that tears were covering her eyes, which were now falling down with a clattering sound. Affected by this sudden emotion, Shenshi seemed to see the life of a girl with the same name. When she was born, she was loved by her grandparents because she inherited from generation to generation, like her grandmother. The family was also a small asset, so when she was a child, she was a bully in the family. She wanted wind and rain, even more favored than her younger brother, who lived in the main room with her grandparents. Every day, she ate dim sum, which were eagerly watched by her sisters, younger brothers. When they are in a good mood, Shenshi will give them some dim sum and let them have meat. But this kind of little son's life changed as my grandparents left in a cold wind. His grandparents died one after another. Before Shenshi, who was 5 years old, could feel sad, his mother drove him out of the main house and moved him to the smallest room in the family. Dim sum toys were confiscated and distributed to sisters and younger brothers. Shenxi didn't even have time to cry and persuade her to stay, so she was repeatedly beaten and scolded by her mother and assigned a bunch of tasks, from boiling water and cooking in the morning to washing clothes and cleaning the room during the day. Father just looked at Shenxi coldly, giving her a candy when her small body couldn't hold on. This made Shenxi feel even more warm, making her feel that this family and her father loved her. It was not until yesterday that she finally found a chance to get along with her father alone, and proposed that she wanted to learn embroidery like her sisters, or go to school like her brother. Her father rebuffed her, and Shenxi finally recognized the reality. At the age of 9, she is no longer a child in this world. She gradually realized in her heart that cooking over a fire all day had no future, and that the old ladies at home were stronger and better at it than her. So she wants to learn embroidery, or go to school, just like her sisters, and learn some skills to get out of the hard life. Her father's rejection shattered her remaining fantasies. One night later, at the young age of 9, Shenxi's soul entered her body, but the remaining despair and memories of Shenxi still affect the current Shenxi. So upon hearing her mother's nagging and urging, Shenxi instinctively blurred her eyes with tears. The momentary connection of events left Shenxi stunned for a moment. Then, she wiped away her tears and looked at the already bustling stove in front of her. Shenxi used to cry because she still had fantasies about her family. Now that she has grown up from a similar family in her previous life, she will live a good life for you. Shenxi secretly swore. Damn girl. The water is almost boiling, why don't you say a word? Every day, you're like a gourd, unable to do anything well, and even the firewood at home is bought with money. His forehead was once again fiercely hit by his fingers, and Shenxi was suddenly pushed by the force and couldn't squat down firmly. With this force, he fell to the ground. Mother's sharp voice sounded anxious and malicious, "Oh, you dead girl. The ground is so dirty, you don't need your clothes anymore. Oh, you dead girl. All right. It's so noisy early in the morning that it's not over, is it?" A familiar reprimand sounded, and it was Shen Zhaokuan, the father of the original body, who got up. If it had been in the past, every time I heard my father stop his mother's voice, I would have thought my father was speaking for me. Now, Shenxi only feels that she has thought too much about herself. Anyone who listens to her sharp voice early in the morning would feel a headache and want her to immediately shut up. In a family where no one cares and only cares about whether you can do work, Shenxi lowers her head, carries her original memories of what she wants to do, and does it well in a proper manner. If she suffers from amnesia or says she is not Shenxi, waiting for her will not be a good outcome. In the middle of the day, everyone in the family had breakfast. The father took his sisters and 3 of them to the silk shop, while the younger brother went out to school. When the mother saw that the family had left the house, she told Shenxi to pack up the dishes and stopped by. At this time, only Shenxi and an old lady are left at home in the Shen family of Nuoda. "Miss Eyre, if Madam asks you to tidy up the dishes, then I'll go home first. I'll come back at noon to cook for home." After speaking, the old lady also left. The Shen family of Nuoda only left Shenxi alone at this time. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Friends. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Friends. Shenxi ate the leftover food in the kitchen and neatly washed the dishes before coming out of the somewhat dim kitchen. Standing in the spacious courtyard of the Shen family, Shenxi felt a sense of confusion that could not distinguish between the past and the present. The Shen family is a wealthy family, and Shenxi, who came from later generations, can clearly understand this from his original memory. The dim sum and the silks and satins she wears are proof of this. Before the death of her grandparents, there were a number of servants in the family. She and her grandmother were in the main house, and there was a special nurse to take care of them. Although her grandmother was partial to Shenxi, she was not bad to other brothers and sisters. Their daily life was taken care of by special people. In my memory, although my mother was favored by my father for her beauty and played around with her daughter-in-law who had been married from the countryside, my grandmother was not unhappy but did not find it difficult. Since my mother got married, although she occasionally looked at my grandmother's face, she went from being a rural woman to becoming a wife who did not touch the water of spring with 10 fingers. She was well cared for and was always taken care of by servants. Shenxi's footsteps wandered around the empty Shen family. It was now late autumn, and her grandmother used to love flowers and plants. Regardless of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the yard was lush with faint fragrance. When Shenxi was young, she loved to walk and appreciate in her grandmother's sight. And now in the Shen family, except for the peach tree on the east side of the yard, the figures of other flowers and plants have become scattered from their original abundance, with only a few pots of cold-resistant chrysanthemums blooming warmly, as if knowing that if they don't bloom again, they will be abandoned under an excuse. My mother has been farming since childhood and has no interest in taking care of flowers and plants. After my grandmother's death, some flowers and plants that need careful care have been thrown away by my mother bit by bit. The remaining ones are cold and drought-resistant. At the right time, I'm thinking about your grandmother again. Be careful, your mother saw me and she's going to find a way to teach you a lesson. Suddenly, a clear voice came, and Shenxi was startled when she saw a living person in the empty Shen family. Why, your house hasn't locked yet, so I came in. Why are you so timid and scared by me again? The visitor walked forward without any hesitation and said to Shenxi. Shenxi patted her chest, calmed her pounding heart, and looked at the person in front of her. This was the daughter of a neighbor, Zhong Chun. She had no connection with Shenxi before, and Shenxi only remembered her when she was led out by her grandmother. Zhong Chun hid in the corner with envious eyes. Later, when his grandmother passed away, Shenxi became a little helper in the family. Zhong Chun occasionally approached Shenxi while there was no one at home. Although Shenxi didn't know why Zhong Chun always came to see her work, she also felt that she was her only friend and could talk to her. Shenxi, your clothes look quite nice. Zhong Chun walked over and pulled Shenxi's sleeve, her eyes shining as she spoke. The current Shenxi is no longer the one who longed for friends as before. She withdrew the sleeves that were repeatedly rubbed by Zhong Chun and answered calmly, "This is the last piece of clothing my mother found for me, which my grandmother prepared for me. In the future, I won't have it anymore, so I can't give it to you." Zhong Chun was caught off guard by Shenxi's words, and with a hint of shyness, she withdrew her hand. The first time she entered the courtyard, she no longer looked around, but instead focused her gaze on Shenxi. Why do you think so? Although my clothes are all patched several times, I won't take you either. After all, your mother doesn't like you, and maybe she won't make clothes for you in the future. So, you should be like me. You don't have any new clothes to wear anymore, so you can only pick up the clothes left by your younger siblings. Zhong Chun spoke words of empathy for the same illness, but her eyes unconsciously scanned Shenxi's face over and over again. She always felt that today's Shenxi was not doing something right. In the past, when Shenxi heard about her grandmother's death and her mother's displeasure, her eyes always showed a melancholic expression. It was as if she was still a young lady who used to be surrounded by stars, with untimely sadness for spring and autumn. Little did she know that she was just like herself, a pitiful little girl who didn't love her parents or fight for her, so she had nothing. Sensing that Zhong Chun's gaze was constantly on his face, Shenxi looked back directly. In an instant, Zhong Chun's secretly observing gaze seemed to have been burned away. At the right time, I always feel like you're a bit different. Zhong Chun said awkwardly. Yesterday was my birthday, and after that, I am no longer a child. Shenxi said with some meaning. However, Zhong Chun misunderstood Shenxi's words and felt that no wonder she had become unfamiliar with him. It turned out that it was his fault for not congratulating her on her birthday. Zhong Chunpiao pouted, and Shenxi was like this. When she was a young lady, she always liked to play with these empty-headed and brainless things. These people, being able to eat and dress warmly, live without being beaten or scolded, would be great. What is their birthday? It's just a waste of money. Zhong Chun thought he had found the crux and smiled pleasantly at Shenshi. Don't be unhappy anymore. It's not my mother. Yesterday she said she wouldn't let me go out and insisted on making me pickle pickled vegetables. I pickled a whole vat of pickled vegetables yesterday, but it exhausted me. So I didn't bring your birthday gift, and once it's passed, I can't give it anymore. So, next year, I'll prepare a bigger gift for you, okay? According to Zhong Chun's understanding of Shenshi, she has always been overly kind. Although she has been struggling herself, she cannot bear to hear others living poorly. If Shenshi had listened to his own words in the past, he would not have tangled with the non-existent birthday gift, but would have loved himself and been ordered to work by his mother. Maybe he would have taken out his treasured dim sum for himself, so he would not have come in vain today. After finishing speaking, Zhong Chun looked at Shenshi eagerly, but Shenshi remained unmoved. Zhong Chun's mother has always favored sons over daughters since childhood, so she has been starving ever since. Since she was able to walk steadily at the age of 3 or 4, she has been helping her family wash and wash. Therefore, although Zhong Chun is 1 year older than her original body, she is not as tall as Shenshi. Although she is not yellow and skinny, she is still dry and dry. Her hair is withered and yellow, and her face is dark, with only a pair of big eyes flickering on her face. There is a hint of energy in her calculations. At this moment, her eyes are fixed on Shenshi, as if a weasel sees a chicken with an irresistible desire. Shenshi was stared at with such a gaze, feeling a bit disgusted in his heart. Zhong Chun is very accurate. Whether it is the current Shenshi or the former Shenshi, although he is not doing well, he cannot see others suffer. He belongs to the kind of person who is too kind. But now Shenshi has grown up to graduate from university because this personality has suffered losses in society, so he has restrained his excess kindness. Her kindness is only reserved for people on the same frequency as herself. At this moment, Zhong Chun, with a strong sense of purpose, could not have been accepted by Shenshi. Just as he was about to speak, there was a commotion coming from the door. Shenshi had not yet reacted, but Zhong Chun quickly jumped up and ran out like clockwork. There were still lingering words in the air that Zhong Chun was unwilling to say. Your mother has returned, I will go back first. We will have a chance to talk again next time. Unwilling to eat dim sum, Zhong Chun quickly left the back door. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. 8 Characters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. 8 Characters. That dead girl from the Zhong family is here again, isn't she? I've told you so many times, she's just here to cheat on food and drink, you just can't understand. This girl runs fast, let me catch her next time, let me teach her a lesson. Zhong returned home and spoke unwillingly in the yard, with her waist crossed. After speaking, he looked at Shenshi sitting next to the chrysanthemums and pointed his tender fingers at her. Has the rice been steamed yet? Have the vegetables been stir-fried yet? Why are you sitting there foolishly? When your father comes back later, the food is not ready yet. If he gets angry and hits someone, I won't stop him. Shenshi no longer had the morning's panic. She was pointed at by her mother, Jiang Shi, and slowly stood up, looking at the woman who spoke harshly at her. Jiang was favored by her father Shen Zhaokuan for her beauty, and even after more than a decade, her charm still lingered. Her skin has a porcelain white color that is different from that of ordinary rural women, with a graceful figure and dark hair. These 3 points alone make her stand out from the crowd of women. With a foundation of beauty, even if she has not read a book or gained any temperament, she can surpass 90% of women in the world with just a pair of almond eyes. However, she may have been too ungrateful, so as she grew older, her cheeks in the lower half of her face became slightly concave and some sarcastic expressions appeared, which damaged her beauty. Jiang was so flustered by Shenxi's gaze at strangers that she felt flustered for a moment. The words evil flashed through her mind, but she still scolded Shenxi relentlessly. What are you looking at? I haven't seen your mother before. Go cook now. Shenxi didn't argue either, so she walked around the courtyard from the corridor and headed towards the kitchen. Seeing Shenxi obediently, Jiang breathed a sigh of relief. Shenxi has been favored by her mother-in-law since she was young because she looks like her grandmother. As she grows older, she becomes more and more like her. Just now, when she looked at her silent appearance, it reminded Jiang of her mother-in-law's appearance when she first stepped into the Shen family. She looked at you quietly, as if she could see through people's hearts but was too lazy to pay attention. Jiang remembered one time when his man got drunk, and the Shen family had 3 generations of muddy legs. It was because they married the mother-in-law of a dilapidated official lady that they became wealthy and established a silk shop in the city. Thinking about the silk shop where business has been declining since my mother-in-law passed away, I realized that a few days ago, my husband looked at my second son Shenxi and had a wild idea that he should try to run the business like his mother-in-law. Maybe he could revive the business like her mother-in-law did. Jiang shook her head, and my husband was also in a hurry to seek medical treatment. Even if my mother-in-law really had the ability, how old is my second son? How much can she learn from her mother-in-law's skills? Madam came back early today. Ma turned from behind the shadow wall, but unexpectedly met Jiangshi, who was staring at Shenxi's departure direction in a daze, and said somewhat awkwardly. At this moment, Zhong's mind was not on her, and he knew that Ma was someone who could cheat and play tricks. If it weren't for the cheap wages she wanted, he would have driven her away long ago. Jiang impatiently waved her hand and urged her to quickly cook. Although the second person has become more proficient in household chores, the stove is too high and the spatula is too heavy, making it difficult for her to pick up and cook. Ma was surprised by how his wife showed mercy today. Despite forgiving her, he didn't dare to delay. Although the Shen family was in a lot of trouble, they never owed their wages. It was better for him to go and work quickly. Watching Ma hurriedly rush to the kitchen, Jiang, who had never had much backbone in her heart, looked at the chrysanthemums in the courtyard and missed her mother-in-law. Although constrained by my mother-in-law, there is no need to worry about money. Thinking of the good days when there were 7 or 8 servants in the family, Jiang Shi returned to the main room and lay down on the soft couch in the side of the room, thinking, if my mother-in-law is still there, she is a happy day to lie down without such a series of doors. My mother-in-law has great rules. She is not allowed to lie down in the daytime except for the afternoon nap. But although the days when I want to lie down are good, the money is short. The next time my sisters and brothers come back, I have no money to help. Jiang, who has always been heartless, has some rare worries. Hey! Shen Zhaoquan returned home with his 2 daughters at noon and sat at the table in the main room, sighing and groaning. His 2 daughters stood in front of him, both afraid to touch the mold. What's going on here? On the side, Jiang, who had been groggy on the soft couch for a while, heard the commotion in the main room, tidied up her hair, and asked with concern. Shen Zhaoquan turned around and saw that Zhong's sideburns were slightly loose. He couldn't help but frown and said, lying down during the day, what's it like? You're relatively idle at home, not to mention doing some household chores. Since Huan Fan celebrated the Chinese New Year at 5 years old, it's time to go to college. If you're free, make clothes for Tsong Huan and let him wear them to school. Shen Tsong Huan can only read in front of Fan Xiucai on the street now. With a solid foundation, he can only go to the academy to study after the Chinese New Year. Knowing that her husband was feeling upset, she found fault. Jiang didn't argue with her husband, but only smiled gently. I was lost in thought just now, squinted for a while, and didn't lie down, she said. Shen Zhaoquan raised his eyebrows. His own wife is someone who has beauty but lacks ambition. What she does on a daily basis only depends on her temperament, but she still thinks about things today. Shen Zhaokuan deliberately followed Zhong's words and asked, "What's on your mind? Tell me." I didn't expect that Jiang Shi was not just making excuses casually, but sitting seriously in front of her husband and sending away her 2 daughters solemnly. Seeing Zhang's solemnity, Shen Zhaokuan couldn't help but sit up straight. Is it really something? Did my mother-in-law's family come over again to ask for money? Previously, 3 melons and 2 jujubes were enough to pass the time, but now the business in the shop is bleak, and I'm afraid I won't be able to make any money. This time, I'm afraid I'll lose face in front of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. Shen Zhaokuan thought with some distress. As the head of the family, you have said that since my mother-in-law got married, the family's situation has only improved day by day. However, I don't see my mother-in-law interfering in the family's business on weekdays. So, do you think my mother-in-law is just a good 8-character and prosperous family? Perhaps his wife could say these words, but Shen Zhaokuan was stunned for a moment before following Zhang's words. I can't say that either. Shen Zhaokuan hesitated a bit. I remember when I was a child, my mother often worked with my father in the shop. Later, when the family's business stabilized, my mother returned home. I think my mother also had some unknown means to make my father open and shut up, all thanks to her mother. Jiang pursed her lips and said, my father-in-law looks at my mother-in-law, so naturally everything is good. I have to follow my mother-in-law in everything, big and small. It's not that my mother-in-law really has any real skills. My sisters always envy me for getting married well. They say how good my husband is to her. But they don't know that my father-in-law is really good to my mother-in-law. Otherwise, my mother-in-law would not have a cold spell. Soon, he followed me. What if the 8 characters are good? My mother has passed away now. Shen Zhaokuan spoke with some sadness in his heart. When his parents were still around, he felt that they always treated him like a child and didn't let him be the master of everything. But now that his parents have passed away for less than 2 years, he fully understands their kindness. He can live his leisurely life with peace of mind only when his parents shelter him from the wind and rain. But now that his parents are gone, he needs to support his own family and support a large family before he realizes the difficulties of life. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Replacement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Replacement. Grandma has left, don't we still have a mistress? Jiang said somewhat urgently. My mother has always told me since I was young that this person's 8 characters don't match, and we can't get along well. We must have a harmonious 8-character relationship in order to get along well. Husband, think about it, why is my mother-in-law indifferent to everyone, not even to my grandson, and only so close to my second son? Shen Zhaokuan followed Zhang's train of thought and said, are you saying that? That's right, husband. You said, when my second child was just a child, I couldn't say I couldn't laugh. Why did my mother-in-law fall in love with her? It must be a compatibility between the 8 characters, a natural affinity. Just like me, I was born with a different 8 characters from my second child. This is not because I am a harsh mother, but because it is fate, there is no way. Jiang had already found an excuse for her own favoritism to make her feel at ease. She never expected that after giving birth to her eldest daughter, she would hope to have a son day and night. However, when she saw that her second son was still a daughter and her hopes were dashed, she vented her anger on her second son and refused to take good care of him during the postpartum period. Her mother-in-law, Xie, then took the second son over and raised him. Time is truly a double-edged sword. It can make those who are feeling guilty forget their mistakes and live a peaceful life. It can also make those who have thoughts miss more and more. Jiang Shi forgot the original reason, only installed his thoughts on his mother-in-law, and became more excited. He approached his husband and whispered, you don't know, my husband, today when I came back from outside, my second child was watching flowers in the yard. They all said that whoever raised them would follow. When my mother-in-law passed away, my second child was only 6 years old, and they said that the child only remembered things when she was 7 years old. You said that she had followed us for so many years, but she was still the same as her mother-in-law when she was alive. What was that? And the second child's appearance was exactly the same as her mother-in-law. I felt cold today. It's as if she were carved like her mother-in-law. Zhong sure said that, frowning, she was still uncomfortable. Years of reverence for her mother-in-law was engraved in her bone marrow, which made her unable to get close to her daughter who was more and more similar to her mother-in-law. Yesterday was the birthday of the second child. In fact, she knew that even if she pushed the worst dim sum in the room to the second child, she would be happy for a long time. After all, she was a child and easy to coax. But in the end, she did not open this mouth, and watched the light in the second child's eyes go out. This feeling made her feel happy to revenge her mother-in-law successfully. As for her daughter's disappointment, she only felt uncomfortable for a moment and didn't take it to heart. Anyway, since her daughter is not close to her, she doesn't need to worry about her. Upon hearing Zhong's analysis, Shen Zhaoquan knew that Zhong had beauty and no brain, and her statement had no reliable basis. However, he still had some persuasion in his heart. In the 3 years since his parents passed away, the silk and satin factory has been going from bad to worse. Before seeing his parents run it, he always thought it was a simple matter. Just buying and selling, right? As the money flowing in the shop became less and less, he not only did not earn any money in the past 3 years, but also used his family's savings to subsidize the shop. Seeing that in winter, the light and thin fabrics in the shop should have been taken down long ago and bought some thick materials to sell, but Shen Zhaoquan procrastinated day by day. It wasn't because he didn't want to purchase, but because he didn't make any money from this batch of thin gauze materials in summer, he had no spare money to purchase. If they continue to use their last savings from home to purchase goods, and by the end of the year, just like last year, if the goods are not sold much and the money is used up, their family of 6 will not be able to pass the New Year's Eve and can only go out to beg for food while holding on to a pile of goods. Shen Zhaoquan was also in a hurry to seek medical treatment. Upon hearing his wife's words, he nodded randomly and said, "Then this afternoon, let Shui go to the shop with me." Today. Zhong was surprised. Is it so urgent? The second child has been at home all day, with a disheveled face. I'll give her a bath today, change her clothes, and go tomorrow. Shen Zhaoquan has been relying on his parents for many years and has not had much decision-making ability. Now that Zhang Shi has proposed that his second child's bazi is good, Shen Zhaoquan has a glimmer of hope in his heart. His parents no longer have to rely on his daughter's bazi, so he wants to rely on his daughter's bazi to make business better. So, with a hint of eagerness to find dependence again, he looked at his daughter-in-law with dissatisfaction and said, "Even if you don't like the times, don't go too far with her. She's a young lady who cooks and cleans all day. What does it look like? Isn't there a servant in the house?" Jiang listened to her husband's complaints, pursed her lips and muttered inwardly, "You only provide so much household income in a month, how can you still afford to raise servants?" But he obediently agreed, "I didn't ask my second son to do anything. When I was a child, she was at home and out, and she was already 9 years old. I just asked her to help burn a fire and wash a bowl. I know, I won't let her do it today, okay?" Shen Zhaoquan did not feel sorry for his daughter, but rather felt dissatisfied that he could not bring her to the shop immediately. Now that Zhang Shi had evaded him with a word, he stopped talking and only waited for tomorrow to bring him financial luck with the opportunity to clean up. Shen Shi, who was burning a fire in the kitchen, didn't know that she was about to be pushed out by her mother to become a lucky boy. If she cannot bring financial luck to the shop according to her parents' expectations and wait for her, besides her mother's continued unhappiness, she may also face her father's disappointment, and her future situation may be even worse than it is now. Under the command of Mrs. Ma, the food was brought to the main hall, but Shen-Shi did not refute it. Sometimes small things that are easy for adults can be tough for children. Of course, Ma Pazi knew that a child's hands were tender, and hot dishes with pot heat would scorch her hands. However, just now, facing her wife's momentary guilt and humility, she twisted her heart. She wanted to torture Shen-Shi. Who made you the wife's daughter and not favored? You deserve it for your mother. Shen-Shi didn't say much, but picked up a plate filled with steaming hot dishes and walked steadily towards the main hall. In Shen-Shi's memory, all the items in the Shen family were carefully selected by her grandmother, just like the porcelain plates in her hand. They were not thin plates commonly used by ordinary families, but custom-made, with thick and heavy feet, and looked very imposing. It is said that this is the style she used in her mother's house. But now the plate custom-made by her grandmother is being held in the hands of her beloved granddaughter. Shen-Shi's slender fingers have already exerted all their strength, and her joints are starting to turn white. The hot air is steaming through the plate, and the child's thin fingertips are starting to feel hot. However, Shen-Shi's face shows no signs of it. Adult endurance has played a role, and she steadily places the plate on the table. Shen Zhaokuan, who was sitting in the main seat waiting for a meal, saw Shen-Shi carrying vegetables in and thought that her botzi might be the only opportunity for the Shen family's silk shop. If they couldn't sell the goods this time, their shop would close and the family would no longer make a living. Shen Zhaokuan's face showed a kind smile. As soon as his daughter placed the plate on the table, Shen Zhaokuan held his father's rack, touched the specially left long beard, and greeted Shen-Shi. She is really capable. Working at home is becoming more and more stylish. In the past, the plate was unstable, but now it has grown a lot. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Shop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Shop. Faced with his father's superficial praise, Shen-Shi couldn't pretend to be happy when the child was praised. Even if this cheap father asked her if her fingers hurt, she wouldn't be unable to make a perfunctory expression. Shen-Shi thought, lowering her head to prevent her parents sitting in the seat from seeing her untimely indifference. Shen Zhaokuan did not receive a response and felt a bit embarrassed. Zhong, who was next to him, was dissatisfied and said, "Why are you keeping your head down when your father is talking to you? Who in the family is bullying you?" Zhong was habitually dissatisfied with Shen-Shi, and the three children around her only watched with their eyes open and remained silent. The second son has been following his grandmother since he was young, and he is not from the same country as them. In the past, his mother secretly criticized the second son, but now he is openly scolding him more and more openly. They have become accustomed to it. Shen Zhaokuan raised his hand to stop Zhong's reprimand and said, "All right, she is still young, isn't it normal to be a bit shy? She, come over and sit next to your father. After dinner, ask your mother to take you a shower and change into new clothes. Didn't you ask me to take you to the shop to learn handicrafts a few days ago? Father will take you tomorrow." Shen Zhaokuan's words surprised Shen-Shi. She suddenly lifted her head and smiled at her father. "Thank you, father. Although pie may fall from the sky, it may be a trap, but Shen-Shi doesn't think too much now. It's good to be able to leave the house. Under the hands of this mother who hates her for no reason all day, she doesn't know how long she can endure it, and what things she will do when she can't bear it anymore." When Shen Zhaokuan saw his daughter smile, he was also happy. "So you want to go to the shop to learn craftsmanship? Do you know that it's the most comfortable to learn craftsmanship at home? It's not only hard to learn craftsmanship outside, but the master will beat and scold you. Ask your sisters if they want to stay at home." Shen-Shi looked at the two girls across from her. Her older sister, Shen Baozhu, had an oval face, which was most similar to her mother. She had almond eyes and a graceful nose, and was wearing a goose-yellow biker. She looked approachable and was 3 years older than herself. She could already tell that she was a beautiful woman. The younger ones, with black eyes that exude a different kind of spirit, are the most clever in the family. Shenxi, as the second daughter of the family, is not favored by her mother, let alone the third. She is still a daughter. If it weren't for her mother getting pregnant again shortly after she was born and being guided by experts when going to the temple to burn incense, this baby would be a boy. The mother was happy for a moment and felt that it was the younger brother brought by the third. As the third daughter of the family, the third's life should be the most difficult for the family. By the way, the third child's name, despite the opposition of her in-laws, was firmly called Zhaodi by her mother. The name Zhaodi was originally prepared by the Zhong family for Shenxi. The eldest of the 4 children of the Zhong family, Shen Baozhu, was born when their parents had a strong affection for each other, so she is the treasure in the hands of the Zhong family and Shen Zhaokuan, as can be seen from her name. When Shenxi arrived, due to Zhong's excessive behavior, her mother-in-law Xie had to intervene and took Shenxi away, and personally named her. The name Shi means that she cannot be loved by her parents, has no support, and hopes that as a young woman, she can prioritize her own happiness and not be sad due to the displeasure of others. Moreover, the only son of the Zhong family, Shen Songhuan, was also married by her father-in-law following Shenxi's name. The saying, praising the times and enjoying everything, made her even more unhappy. For these 2 reasons, the Zhong family never called Shenxi's name. The third person, Shen Zhaodi, finally didn't feel so sad because she fulfilled the wishes of the Zhong family, brought her younger brother, and was clever enough to flatter and take care of the only boy in the family. Shen Zhaodi has always been clever and knows that she doesn't have much support at home. Even if she followed her father's words and looked at Shenxi, yes, second sister, you don't know how much I and big sister envy you for being able to stay at home. Since I started learning craft in the shop, my 10 fingers have not been relieved and my head has been pricked and swollen. The third person held up his slender and slightly swollen fingers to show everyone, making them laugh with a playful expression. Shen Zhaokuan smiled and waved his hand. You said, your sister should be learning embroidery for the first time, but it only takes you a month to get started. It's just you, and you can't calm down. After 3 months, you can still prick yourself. Later, I'll go to the shop and pass by the revival hall. I'll buy you a bottle of ointment to apply, so you won't even be able to grasp the fabric in the future. Shen Zhaodi was overjoyed and said, Thank you, father. Don't worry, father. With the ointment, I will definitely study embroidery well. The Shen family has had their own silk shop since their grandmother's generation, which can be considered as a prosperous family. Originally, they planned to invite someone to come and teach embroidery to the girls in the family, but perhaps because they felt that their only son couldn't support the family, their grandmother made it a rule to let the girls in the family go to the shop to learn craft from the embroidery lady after their 6th birthday, which is also to let the girls in the family see the world more. In Shenxi's memory, from the moment she could walk and speak, her grandmother began teaching her embroidery. The first time she embroidered a little duck, she happily showed it to her grandmother. Her grandmother touched her pricked finger and said to her with some heartache, Xi's hand is slender, with distinct joints, and is naturally a hand for writing and playing the piano. Now that you have a needle, I want you to learn some skills for settling down. When my grandmother is away, writing and playing the piano are elegant things that are useless. It's still because you have real skills that you don't need to ask for help. At first, Shenxi didn't understand her grandmother's meaning. She only knew that her grandmother asked her to practice embroidery, so she practiced it seriously. It was said that the silk shop at home was an industry established by her grandmother through her embroidery skills. Once she practiced it well, she could also have the same skills as her grandmother. Jiang and Shen Zhaokuan rarely come here to have sex, so naturally they didn't know that Shenxi had already been enlightened by his grandmother's guidance and learned some basic embroidery techniques. But now Shenxi has never received a needle, so naturally she has to start from scratch. Ironically speaking, as parents, Shen Zhaoquan and Jiang Shi were not familiar with their daughter's original appearance, which allowed Shen Shi to freely express herself today. After lunch, Shen Zhaoquan and his two daughters went out again. Jiang returned to the house and lay down. She had been married to the Shen family for more than 10 years and had already developed the habit of taking naps. Shen Shi was instructed to go to the kitchen to boil water, wash herself thoroughly, and go to the shop tomorrow with a refreshing feeling. As the head lady, don't embarrass the Shen family. Shen Shi didn't care about her mother's derogatory words, but went to the kitchen with a joyful mood to boil water, quickly take a shower and wash her hair, and then sat on the porch, taking advantage of today's good sun to dry her long hair. Holding a comb in his hand, carefully combing his long hair, Shen Shi's eyes exuded vitality. "Shi, why are you so happy? Did Uncle Shen bring you something delicious?" Zhong Chun sneaked into the courtyard at some point, looked at Shen Shi, and tentatively asked. Shen Shi looked at Zhong Chun with calculation in his eyes. Because he was happy, he did not have the aversion in the morning. "It's nothing. There is still half a mantou left in the kitchen. If you want to eat it, go get it right away, and it will be gone when Mrs. Ma comes back." Zhong Chun still walked quickly to the kitchen. She was even cleaner to the Shen family kitchen than her own, and did not dare to take more things. She only took the mantou left on the pot and came out, gulping down mantou while grumbling discontentedly, "Only mantou, no dim sum." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Zhong Chun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Zhong Chun. Seeing that Shen Shi didn't seem to hear her complaints, Zhong Chun wisely stopped talking. In the past, Shen Shi was a gentle person. When she heard herself complaining about something bad, she would immediately pour out all the good things, and even if she couldn't bear to eat them, she would give them to her. But today, Shen Shi is clearly different. She won't get used to herself. Zhong Chun lived a difficult life at home, relying on such a small animal like intuition to avoid being beaten and scolded, and successfully muddled through to the present day. Zhong Chun quietly sat down at the railing next to Shen Shi's porch, pretending to sway her legs comfortably while secretly observing Shen Shi. Shen Shi's hair was very thick. She sat in the sun for a while and combed her comb for a while, but it was still very moist. However, she was not in a hurry, only slowly combing her long hair. She noticed that the gaze of Zhong Chun, who was glancing over to observe, was not paying attention. She combed her hair on her own, as if enjoying the sunshine very much. Zhong Chun is only 10 years old at the end. Although there is a scholar father in the family, he always regards his daughter as unnecessary and allows his wife to beat and scold her child, completely immersed in his own sage books. So as the eldest daughter of the family, Zhong Chun is even more difficult not only compared to Shen Baozhu, who is also the eldest daughter, but also compared to Shen Shi, who is not loved by his parents. But fortunately, since her birth, Zhong Chun has not enjoyed the love and care of her elders. She has grown up like a weed, so she will not be like Shen Shi before. Because she has enjoyed the only preference of her grandparents, has been in Mongolia, and has read books, she cannot accept the emotional gap and lack of hope in life. She cannot bear it, and only in the midst of depression, can she exchange for herself to come. I guess I switched with myself when I was young, right? With a free life, she must be able to live better. Timely. Timely. Why are you distracted? What are you thinking? Zhong Chun was indeed very observant of his words and expressions. Shen Shi's gaze froze for a moment before she realized it and called out. Shen Shi regained his composure and looked at Zhong Chun with a clear gaze. Zhong Chun shook her arms exaggeratedly and said, "Shi, why do you seem to have grown up overnight? This gaze is like Grandma Shen from before." Zhong Chun is talking about her grandmother, Xie Shi. Although she doesn't like liveliness and is aloof, she is very kind to children. The children in this alley all love her grandmother very much. Zhong Chun, who was unloved since childhood, naturally liked his grandmother more. Because only this old lady would give her delicious dim sum every time she saw her. Grandma Chun gave her dim sum for the first time in her life. Although her grandmother died 3 years ago, Zhong Chun still missed her and her dim sum from time to time. Upon hearing Zhong Chun's words, Chun Shi withdrew her gaze and started combing her hair again. After a while, she said, "It's better for children like us to grow up earlier." Zhong Chun nodded forcefully and said, "No, I've been looking forward to growing up. When I grow up, I have enough strength, so I don't have to be afraid of my mother beating and scolding anymore. I can still go out and earn money. When I make money, I'll throw it in front of my mother and let her know that I'm different from my dad who only knows how to read. I can earn money." Zhong Chun clenched his fists and felt incredibly happy just imagining the arrival of that day. Upon hearing Zhong Chun's words, Chun Shi casually glanced at her hand. Zhong Chun was sensitive to the gaze of others and immediately sensed Chun Shi's intentions. She felt a bit embarrassed and also had a broken appearance. She reached out to Chun Shi and said, "It's useless. Grandma Chun has already seen my hands. She said I worked too early and my fingers are not sensitive enough to become an embroidery lady." As she spoke, Zhong Chun withdrew her rough, red, and dry-skinned hand and said, "Besides, if my hand touches the fabric, it will be useless." Zhong Chun looked at Chun Shi and said, "I thought you had changed, but in fact, like Grandma Chun, you look lonely and are actually a good person. You don't have to worry about me. Although I can't be an embroiderer, I have some strength and can work hard to make money." As Zhong Chun spoke, he seemed to have thought of something good. He opened his hands and embraced the slightly warm sun, saying, "I've been inquiring about it for a long time. When this winter passes and the spring of next year comes, when the merchants come and go more often, I'll go to the south gate to pick up work. There are the most merchants there. They have money and need guides, and those little beggars are worried about using them. As a local person like me, I just need to guide them and carry gifts, and I can earn 3 large sums of money at once. I run more diligently, and I can run 3 or 5 times a day. If I'm lucky, I'll get some rewards. There can be around $10 or $20 in the sky." Mom said, "We eat free rice and have to eat $2 big a day. When I earn money, I'll pat her in front of me and block her mouth. Then, I'll see what else she says." As she spoke, Zhong Chun seemed to think of something and waved her hand, "I'm not going to do laundry to make money. In the early years, I followed my mother to do laundry and my hands were frozen out, so I couldn't become an embroidery lady. As long as I avoid this winter, life will be better." Zhong Chun always has such vitality. Chun Shi listened to her plan and didn't say anything else, only giving a small suggestion: "If you don't wash clothes, you can avoid 1 or 2 days. You must go back to sleep, right? How long can you avoid it? The weather is starting to get colder, and Aunt Zhong's most profitable time of the year has arrived. Zhong Chun is so capable that she won't let him escape the whole winter." Zhong Chun felt a bit frustrated. "So, to be a guide for a businessman, you have to dress up neatly to take on the job. If I freeze my fingers like a carrot this year and wait until next summer to reduce swelling, what chance do I have to make money? Merchants come more in spring and summer, but after the peak of summer, they come less." Zhong Chun suddenly became depressed. "My mother's words don't make sense. I've told her that she's going to make a lot of money from next spring after finishing a winter. She doesn't believe it and even says I want to be lazy." Chun Shi thought for a moment and said, "You can go find your father." "No, no, no, no." Before Chun Shi could finish speaking, Zhong Chun exaggeratedly waved his hand. "If Dad knows I'm going to be a guide for a businessman, he must scold me. Although Dad doesn't hit people, if he gets angry, his mother will hit even harder." Chun Shi shook her head and said, "Don't talk too much to your father. Just polish his ink and take action by his side. Although your mother scolds you, she dare not go to your father's place to pull you out. Zhong Chun's eyes lit up upon hearing this, but then went out instantly. But when I hear my dad reading, I feel sleepy. If I can't hold on for 3 days, I'll be kicked out by my dad. Shenshi was speechless. Think about whether your fingers are grinding ink in front of your father or going to do the laundry, and you can decide for yourself. Moreover, it's best for you to recognize a few words with your father so that you can become a guide next year and have more guests. When it came to earning money, Zhong Chunkai regained his energy and said, yes, those businessmen prefer to use literate people as guides. Alright. I've decided that this winter, I'll secretly recognize a few more characters with my dad. Zhong Chun, you dead girl, where have you been hiding again? Come back and cook. Outside the Chun family's house, Aunt Zhong's loud voice rang out. In this alley, for a long time, no one wants to cause trouble, so the only place Zhong Chun can hide is the Chun family. At this moment, Aunt Zhong was pointing fingers and cursing at the outside of the Chun family's house. Zhong Chun listened and smiled faintly, looking at Shenshi. I'll go back first, let's talk another day. As he spoke, he ran away from the back door in a flash. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Shop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Shop. Our shop is also one of the few on the entire Southeast Street. It has a spacious storefront and complete goods. When your grandfather was here earlier, every winter, the carts that purchased goods had to queue up to pick them up. Even if they couldn't pick them up, those small merchants would have to squeeze in to see our goods and look for the same ones elsewhere. Shenshi followed behind her father, listening to him reminiscing about his past prosperous times. She also recalled that every winter, her grandmother had to work overtime to inventory and purchase goods. Although she didn't go to the shop, she didn't have time at home. The second floor is where Xiaonyang is located. You haven't joined Xiaonyang's door yet, so you can't go up. Bao Zhu, take your sister to the second floor to wait for Master Su, remember to be diligent. I'll wait here with your second sister on the first floor for a while. Shen Baozhu glanced at Shen Shi and then led his third sister upstairs. Shen Xiaodi, the third younger sister, playfully blinked at Shen Shi and followed behind the older sister, heading towards the second floor. It is very particular for skilled artists to accept apprentices at that time. Upstairs is the place where Master Su teaches his disciples. If Shen Shi rashly goes up to the second floor, he is offending Master Su. Therefore, Shen Shi followed his father to the back room, where the entire courtyard was purchased by the Shen family. The storefront was a shop, and several rooms in the back could serve as warehouses. There were also 2 temporary living rooms. If there was no time to buy or sell goods, one could stay overnight here. And there is also a small courtyard here, with a large locust tree and wooden tables and chairs under it. When you have free time, you can light a small stove and drink tea and eat under the tree, which is also very comfortable to take a break from work. But for Shen Zhaokuan, this table and chair is the place he spends the most often, because he rarely has busy times. The first 2 assistants are busy enough. Shen Zhaokuan sat in the courtyard, familiar with the way, and greeted Shen Shi, come and take a seat. In our silk and satin factory, this fabric is most afraid of fire, so only this courtyard has this small stove. Come and bake your hands, and save a while. When Master Su tested you, your hands were stiff and couldn't pass. Shen Shi followed his father's instructions and sat over, reaching out to the fireplace to feel a slight warmth. Shen Shi's hands are very good, otherwise her grandmother wouldn't always hold her hand and sigh. At this moment, Shen Zhaokuan couldn't help but see Shen Shi's hand. He was stunned for a moment, then looked up at Shen Shi. For some reason, he blurted out something, you should be a boy. For a moment, Shen Zhaokuan continued speaking. Your hands are different from those of your sisters. They are also slender. Your sisters are all delicate fingers, flesh and blood. That's the hand that holds the needle. Your hands, with distinct bones, should be a man's hand, not suitable for holding a needle, but only suitable for holding a pen. Master Su has always been strict, and I'm afraid Master Su will not accept your hand. As he spoke, Shen Zhaokuan sighed and said, I originally wanted you to learn casually, mainly to stay in the shop and borrow your bazi to bring some financial luck. I didn't expect to have a bad start, and it's also my fault. I didn't realize before that your hands had grown like this. What should I do? Shen Zhaokuan frowned, seeming somewhat distressed. Shen Shi listened, but her eyelids twitched as she tentatively spoke, Father, hasn't business been very good in the shop lately? Shen Zhaokuan grew up in his 30s under the shadow of his parents, but he was heartless and couldn't hide things in his heart. At present, when my daughter asked about the business situation, she openly confided in me about the current situation of the shop, saying, it's not just bad, it's time for life and death. The goods I've purchased in recent years, I don't know what's going on, they just can't be sold. Although I'm following others and buying the hottest colors and fabrics of the time, when it comes to our shop, no one is interested. We all do bulk business in Tianjin, and once our goods arrived at the dock, they were sold out by various local shops. Now, we can only do some retail business to barely make a living. Now it's time to buy winter goods again. At that time, but the money we sell in our shop is only enough for food and drink. If we want to purchase, we will have to spend our own money. The money left by your grandparents is almost bottoming out. If we can't sell the goods we bought with our family's money this time, our shop won't be able to continue, Shen Zhaokuan said, his eyebrows furrowed, and he rarely felt sad. Are they going to shut down their shop in his hands? How can we have the face to meet our ancestors and face the faces of our parents when worshipping our ancestors in the future? These days were the first time in his life that he couldn't sleep soundly. He was afraid of dreaming of his parents when he fell asleep, and had no face to face the disappointed gaze of his parents. Shen Shi frowned unconsciously upon hearing this, not realizing that the situation in the shop had reached such a state. Father, I want to look around in the shop. Shen Zhaokuan was immersed in guilt and casually waved his hand, letting Shen Shi feel at ease. Shen Shi just heard his father's words and went to the house to check the inventory. Shen Shi opened the door and tilted her head 90 degrees. In front of her, there was almost a pile of fabric piled up to the roof. This height was not a pile, but a whole room. After swallowing his saliva, Shen Shi closed the door and went to another room. He took a deep breath and solemnly opened the door. Sure enough, what caught his eye was the pile of goods piled up high on the roof. The inventory of the whole room, even the luster on these silk fabrics, had become somewhat dim due to being covered in dust for a long time. Shen Shi opened each room one by one, and the impact of inventory had gone from shock at the beginning to numbness later on. After looking around, Shen Shi returned to the fireplace and reached out again to warm his cold fingers. Just now I heard my father say that our family's business is difficult, but in fact, Zhong Chun doesn't have much emotional attachment to it. Because in her memory, she had been by her grandmother's side since childhood, saying a rude word. The extravagance of her grandmother's actions was not understood by Shen Shi in the past, but now Shen Shi understands. Not to mention other times, every winter, Shen Shi has seen countless boxes of ivory gemstones, real gold and silver. In the winter of the year when my grandmother passed away, she seemed to have a sense of connection. She had never taken Shen Shi out before, but that time, unlike usual, she brought Shen Shi and these treasure chests to the dock together. Watching boxes of precious stones and real gold being loaded onto the ship, Shen Shi looked at her grandmother and the puzzled gaze of her granddaughter. Her warm hand caressed Shen Shi's head and said, "My grandmother is old, and your father is not someone who can support a family. She is too young, and if there is any contingency, it can also be considered a way out." Shen Shi didn't understand the meaning in her grandmother's words, and her grandmother didn't explain either. She just sighed and took Shen Shi home. This matter was ordered to be kept confidential by her grandmother. Shen Shi did not tell anyone about it, but in her memory, the Shen family was wealthy and could not spend their entire lives eating and drinking. However, Shen Shi's cool gaze turned to his father, fearing that the second generation would not have the ability to make a living, but rather that they wanted to work hard and make a career. If the money of the Shen family were to live a simple life and do business, it would take several lifetimes to spend, but unfortunately, Shen Zhaoquan lacks the ability and wants to do bulk business, exchanging his family's wealth of gold and silver for the fabric mountains in front of him. Moreover, he is eager to exchange his remaining cash for fabric again. At this moment, Shen Shi only felt itching in her hands and tried to control it in order to restrain her impulse to smash something. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Crisis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Crisis. Why are you looking at me like this? Shen Zhaoquan looked up in frustration, and couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart when he saw Shen Shi's expression of hatred towards iron and steel. He almost didn't sit still and fell off the chair. He almost thought that his mother had been reborn. After being frightened, Shen Zhaoquan felt a faint joy in his heart again. The more his daughter looked like a mother, the better. Perhaps, the shop could really be saved. Shen Shi was unaware of his father's hidden and complex thoughts, and simply said, "If my father asks me to learn embroidery, I'm afraid he won't be able to save our shop." Shen Zhaoquan heard his daughter speak up and saw her baby's chubby face. Although it was clear and cool with a childish voice, the joy in his heart flashed away, and the bitterness enveloped him again. "Oh, let the dead horse be a living horse, doctor," he said. Shen Shi ignored his father's discouraging words and immediately spoke, "However, my grandmother once taught me to read the account books and told me about the business experience of the shop for many years. If my father had detailed inventory books, maybe I could find a similar situation from them, and it's not certain if I could come up with a solution." Shen Zhaoquan used to be ignorant of heaven and earth, thinking that his parents had mediocre abilities. Now, through the trials of life, he has come to realize that his own abilities are mediocre, and both parents are divine beings with great abilities. They can even start from scratch and build a promising family business. Upon hearing that his daughter had received the guidance of his divine mother, and had some business acumen from his mother, he immediately stood up as if he were a deity. Regardless of the stool he had knocked over, he quickly ran out and said, "Wait a moment, I will go to the shopkeeper to ask for inventory booklets." Shen Shi looked at his father's back, shook his head, got up, picked up the chair he had knocked over, and sat down again. Shen Shi was not a lie just now. When she was a child, she followed her grandmother, who often talked to her about things in the shop. When she talked about her own proud actions, she would also be proud for a long time. Little Shen Shi didn't understand what his grandmother was saying, only knowing that she was very capable but couldn't go out. She could only tell herself that she was also very proud. When she saw her grandmother speak happily, she applauded and cheered, making her even happier and more thorough. However, those were ultimately just talk on paper, and Shen Shi had never practiced them on his own, so he didn't have much confidence in his heart. But she understood one thing, even though she had never tried anything, she was still much stronger than her father, right? Shen Shi confidently believed so. In no time, the shopkeeper followed Shen Zhaoquan back to the yard, followed behind him, and moved out the inventory booklet from the living room. A thick stack was placed on the table, with dust flying in the air. The shopkeeper's suspicious gaze fell on Shen Shi and looked at Shen Zhaoquan. "Master, although the old lady has the ability to be no less than a man, Miss Eyre is still young and a girl. From childhood to adulthood, this is the first time she has come to the shop, right? Do you really believe that she can bring the shop back to life?" Faced with the shopkeeper's questioning, Shen Shi did not refute it. She only looked quietly at the shopkeeper and then at her father. Shen Zhaoquan, however, did not face the questioning and solemnity of the old shopkeeper. He seemed to push 1,000 pounds of inventory booklets to Shen Shi, waving his hand and saying, "Old Zhou, I know you have done your best for the shop, but aren't we currently troubled by difficulties? You don't know much about my mother's abilities, but I am clear about them. Even when my father was indecisive, he had to go back and ask his mother before he could make a decision. She grew up with her since childhood, not only learning 70 or 80% of her skills, but also learning 20 or 30% of them. We can all overcome these difficulties in front of us. Right, she. You have been following your grandmother since childhood and have been studying her skills diligently, haven't you? Shen Zhaokuan asked Shen Shi softly, but his eyes carried a deep meaning, which made Shen Shi feel stressed. It turns out that my father doesn't always look carefree, and there are times when he feels oppressed like this. Shen Shi didn't think much. Her current thought was just to revitalize the Shen family's silk and satin factory, and she didn't want to start next spring with no place to live. Shen Shi nodded heavily, indicating that she could. Shen Zhaokuan's inexplicable expression in his eyes dissipated, and his face regained its looseness. He patted the shoulder of the old shopkeeper with his hand and comforted him, saying, "Don't worry, old Zhou. My mother used to support the Shen family from poverty to poverty, and her heirs were no better than us. Let's go. Have you been worried for a long time these days? I see that you've been absent-minded on the bed these days, so you probably haven't slept well at night. Let's go, I'll treat you to a drink, Song Songshen." Upon hearing what his boss said, shopkeeper Zhou felt a bit uneasy as he withdrew his expression of pressure on Shen Shi. He stumbled and explained, "Let my boss laugh. Winter goods are about to arrive soon. I'm really worried and can't sleep at night. That's why I got distracted on the counter. I'll go back to the counter now. If there's a big customer coming, I can also receive them immediately." Shen Zhaokuan grabbed onto the shoulder of shopkeeper Zhou and inexplicably pulled him away. "Hi, I don't care about this for a while. I've been worried for the past few days. Now that we've seen the dawn, let's have a drink together. I haven't been in such good spirits for a long time. You can't ruin my mood." Old Zhou was obviously persuaded by Shen Zhaokuan, so he no longer insisted on returning to the cabinet. Instead, he chuckled and followed in Shen Zhaokuan's footsteps. "Master, then it's better to be respectful than obedient." As the two of them were about to leave, Shen Zhaokuan still remembered Shen Shi. He waved his hand but didn't look back. "Shi, after you finish reading the account book, follow your sister back to eat, don't wait for me." Shen Shi looked at their backs and felt a bit dazed for a moment. Is she so trustworthy? After thinking for a moment, Shen Shi felt that it was her grandmother who had great abilities that led her father to trust her, this inexperienced little carrot head, right? Shaking his head, Shen Shi went to the house and took out a new ledger and pen, starting to reorganize the ledger in his hand. She needs to sort out the thickness, color, and value of each fabric and keep them in mind, so that it is convenient for her next actions. Shen Shi put away the last inventory booklet, lifted his head, and twisted his sore neck, only to suddenly realize that the sun had set in the west, and the sunlight had turned orange and dark. Even the nearby fire had been extinguished, leaving only fluffy ash. "Miss Eyre, by the end of the hour, the shop should be closed. Miss Da and Miss San have already gone back." At this moment, the only remaining young man on the shop revealed his head from the shop. Seeing that Shen Shi had stopped his pen, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "At that time, people work at sunrise and set at sunset. The sun is about to set, and there are no more pedestrians on the street." Shen Shi helped the young man to lower the door of the shop together. The young man felt a bit embarrassed and said, "Miss Eyre, these door panels are too heavy. Please don't move, just let me come." Shen Shi picked up the door panel on the side and followed behind the worker, imitating his appearance. He put the door panel away and said, "Did I delay your return home?" The young man, seeing Shen Shi like this, also quickened his pace and enthusiastically answered Shen Shi's words, "Miss Eyre, what can't be delayed? You are the head of the household, and you are all busy. How can I go back? Besides, my home is in the south of the city, not far from here, so it's okay to go back later." My parents told me that the old boss is kind and asked me, a half-grown boy, to come and do things. They all told me to do my best in the shop and not to eat anything for free. Shen Shi only then realized that this guy was left behind by his grandparents. Look at your young age, do you still remember the old shopkeepers? Shen Shi couldn't help but say. For the first time, the lady in charge talked to him so approachably. Although the waiter felt that the second lady's words were a little inconsistent, he was still excited to answer, of course I remember, the old shopkeeper was very kind and friendly. Every year before the new year, I could still see the old lady. I would give us red envelopes and dim sum every year for the new year. The dim sum was beautiful. I have never seen it in my family's life. Upon hearing this, Shen Shi inexplicably felt a sense of familiarity with his colleague. I was raised by my grandmother. In a blink of an eye, my grandmother has been away for 3 years. Yes, the old lady is such a good person. The guy was infected by Shen Shi's emotions and also lowered his tone. Alright, let's go back. See you tomorrow. The door was sealed, and Shen Shi bid farewell to the staff and headed towards his home in Dongcheng. The buddy stayed in place, feeling a bit worried. Miss Air, being alone, might not be safe, so she walked back home step by step. Although it was the first time Shen Shi had gone out in person, she did not show any timidity. Her eyes were naturally open as she looked at the pedestrians and stalls on the street. Although she was only 9 years old, she was very tall because she had taken good care of snacks. Even if Zhong did not like Shen Shi, she did not criticize her for not having enough to eat. Therefore, Shen Shi, dressed in a brocade robe, received the envy of the laboring people on the street as she walked on the road. At this point, most of the people who were busy outside were laboring. Su Zijin looked at them calmly, making those who received the gaze unconsciously smile back. A wealthy young lady who is still so friendly is so easy to gain goodwill. Shen Shi unconsciously thought about it. At this time, the Shen family had already served dinner, and even in the midst of the cheers of the fourth son Shen Zhong, they began to move their chopsticks. When we came back, we called the second child. She was reading the account book at that time. Maybe she didn't hear us. Neither of us sisters realized that she hadn't followed us, so we went home. Shen Baozhu tried to explain why he didn't go home with Shen Shi. But there is no one in the family who cares. Jiang picked a chopstick of fish and meat for her precious son Shen Songhuan and said lightly, she doesn't care about it herself. It's not your fault. She will definitely come back in a while. Let's eat quickly. Shen Baozhu was persuaded by her mother, relieved, scooped out her favorite meat-ball soup, and began to eat. Old San Shen Zhaodi's pitch-black eyes rolled around and she didn't say anything, picking up a chopstick of food in front of her. Shen Zhaokuan had a few drinks with shopkeeper Zhou, and then came back to sleep for a while in the afternoon. He was lazily leaning on his chair when he heard Shen Baozhu say that his second son was reading the accounts carefully, with a smile on his lips. He took a sip of the warm hangover soup placed in front of him. The rules at the Shen family's dining table, where food is not spoken and sleep is not spoken, although they have been somewhat neglected since my mother-in-law Xia left, overall the rules have been formed, and there are still some forms and habits in place. Dinner was quickly finished, and Shen Baozhu, as the elder sister, took Shen Zhaodi and Shen Songhuan to the study. They practiced embroidery while writing, without disturbing each other. Jiang followed Shen Zhaokuan back to the soft bed on the side and lay down to talk. Mrs. Ma frowned and muttered silently that Miss Air would be lazy, while tidying up the dishes and collecting any leftover meat and vegetables, preparing to take them home later. Husband, can you just rest assured? She's been with her mother-in-law for a few years, but she's really young. What skills can she learn? I see, she just wants to be lazy, doesn't want to work at home, doesn't want to learn embroidery, and is afraid of hurting her fingers, that's why she said she knows how to read books. Jiang felt that she had already seen through her little daughter's intentions. Shen Zhaokuan had a satisfied expression on his face, squinting his eyes and leaning on the soft couch. He confidently patted his legs while lazily refuting Zhong, saying, "My mother used to teach fashion. I've seen it a few times when I came back from the bed. When my mother-in-law left, my second son was only 6 years old. She was just a little kid, what did she know?" Before Zhong could finish her dissatisfied words, she was interrupted by Shen Zhaokuan. "What do you know?" "My mother, she comes from a young lady in Kyoto. If it weren't for the conflict with her family, she wouldn't have wandered to this small place like Jinmen. Her abilities, not to mention her knowledge of ancient and modern times, are also well versed in the world. Otherwise, could she start from scratch and take care of the Shen family's great family business?" Seeing her husband praising her mother-in-law so much, Zhong was not convinced but couldn't refute it. When her mother-in-law spoke, sometimes she couldn't understand, so when she faced her mother-in-law, she was the least confident. Shen Zhaokuan saw the Zhong family shut up and then continued, "As a person, I have never loved these secular economies. It was only when my parents passed away suddenly that I had to take over the Shen family's silk and satin factory. Now that my second son can inherit his mother's will and manage the shop, as a son, I can be considered to have successfully inherited the family's industry. In the future, when it comes to ancestor worship and facing the arrangement of parents, I have also given some explanation." Shen Zhaokuan's words made Zhong Shi even more confused. "At first, my mother-in-law said that my husband was ambitious and talented, and couldn't support the family business, so the old couple worked hard to support him and had to be busy until New Year's Eve every year. At that time, my husband had several arguments with his parents-in-law and wanted to accept the family business. Why is it that my husband doesn't love this secular economy now that my mother-in-law hasn't been there for 3 years?" Just as Zhong's mind couldn't turn, she heard her husband say, "Since it's time to accept the family business, I don't have to go to the shop with this money anymore. Didn't you want to buy a set of head and face jewelry for a long time? Tomorrow, I'll go and buy a set of pure gold. I haven't been to Tianfu building for many years. One day, my husband will take you there again. The food cooked by the cook there is called food, and the food cooked by the ma pazi in the house is only edible. By the way, there is only ma pazi as a servant in the house. It's not like that. You can call Ren Yazi to come tomorrow and choose a few more." It needs to be used. Zhong no longer hesitated about her husband's original aspirations, only feeling that she had been hit by immense happiness. The last time she felt this was when she was young. She was chosen by her husband and married into the city. Okay, we'll all listen to you, husband. It's really great that you don't go to the shop." Zhong stood up attentively, squeezing her husband's shoulders and legs. She didn't know why his transformation was happening, but felt that it was simply amazing. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Entrustment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Entrustment. Shen Zhaokuan enjoyed his wife's small attention and only felt that now was the day he should live. Previously, he took over the shop from his parents, which may have been unrecognized for a long time. Therefore, he worked hard to prove himself, but the harder he worked, the more inventory he had, and the less money he had. Fortunately, this time he suddenly woke up and handed over the shop to Shi. Shi is her mother's apprentice. With her taking over, even if the shop closes down in the future, it is still Shi's poor academic performance and her mother's poor teaching, which has nothing to do with herself. At the time of ancestor worship, he can also confidently face his parents' tablets. Without the mountain that oppressed him, Shen Zhaokuan only felt that the sky was clear and there was hope for a peaceful and beautiful life. He calculated that the money left in his hand would be his own bottom-of-the-box money in the future. As for winter goods, that's a matter of the shop, a matter of the times, it has nothing to do with oneself. Didn't I leave a few rooms of inventory for the shop? I'm good enough to sell some, it's enough to maintain the shop. These money can't be used by the shop. These are my own retirement funds. Shen Zhaokuan thought that with this money, as long as he didn't extravagantly waste it and saved some money compared to his parents in the past, it would still be enough for him to use for a lifetime. Shen Zhaokuan couldn't help but secretly feel proud, but fortunately he stopped at the cliff. Once a person loses their sense of responsibility, it feels like they are reopening the world. Shen Zhaokuan is like this now. He no longer thought about inheriting the Shen family's silk and satin estate and promoting it, but entrusted the responsibility of promoting it to Shen Shi to live his own clean life. As for the future suspension of the Shen family's business and the closure of the shop, this responsibility is not with Shen Zhaokuan, but with Shen Shi's lack of ability. Shen Shi didn't know that a huge pie trap had already been pinned on her head without her knowledge. At this moment, Shen Shi, with the joy of going out for the first time, walked slowly and leisurely from the shop to the Shen family. It was originally a 2.25-hour journey, but suddenly she walked for an hour. When she returned to the Shen family and waited for her, there was only a small light in the main room. Shen Shi walks into the main room. On the main hall, the food has been removed and cleaned up. He doesn't even leave a dim sum. Shen Shi stood at the side entrance of the main hall and whispered inwardly, "Father, Mother, I'm back." Shen Zhaokuan cleared his throat and his voice came from inside the room, "Is it time to come back?" "All right. My father didn't think twice today. Tomorrow, he will buy you a carriage for you to drive alone." Speaking of which, Shen Zhaokuan seemed to have been pinched by someone. With a sigh, he immediately spoke up, "You are also proficient in kitchen work. You can go get yourself some food and rest. Tomorrow, you will have to get up early and go to the shop to be busy, so you don't have to come over to pay respects. From now on, the matters in the shop will be left to you. My father has other things to do these days, and if he goes out with your mother tomorrow, he may also bring Baozhu and Songhuan. If you don't see us tomorrow, just go to the shop. Ah, my father has already knocked on the shopkeeper Zhou, and he will listen to your orders. Okay, let's go cook." These words, Shen Zhaokuan didn't even want to explain them to Shen Shi in person. He only explained them through the screen with a vague expression, as if it were the most ordinary instructions. In fact, he knew in his heart that Shen Shi was really the successor taught by his mother. If his mother left too early, how much can Shen Shi learn? He has been with his parents for over a decade and is helpless in the face of the current difficulties in the shop. What can Shen Shi do? Unless she can turn stones into gold and turn all the fabrics in her inventory into gold, the Shen family silk and satin shop will be shut down by colleagues who will run on her in just a few days if he takes away the last sum of money for winter goods. Where is there one who sells thin materials in the winter? At that time, come back by yourself. A symbolic scolding is appropriate, saying that she has let down her mother's teachings and her own trust, and this matter is over. I retired with dignity from the industry of Jinmen's silk shop. In the future, with the last bit of personal money, become an ordinary wealthy man, that's it. It can be said to kill two birds with one stone, as it not only saves face but also keeps the inside. Shen Shi had already changed into old clothes and sat in front of the stove, the flickering flames reflecting her porcelain white face. Her eyebrows, eyes and face inherit the grandness of her grandmother. Her nose is just like her father's, and her porcelain white skin color is actually inherited from her mother, but each one of them has its own eyes. Everyone in the family thinks that she is a miniature of her grandmother. She did not take her father's entrusted words to heart. When her father spoke, he often spoke very well, but it never came true. She had already experienced it in the past 3 years. At this moment, the information about the accumulated fabric in her mind unconsciously flashed through her mind. In terms of quantity, there were more thin materials in winter and spring and summer in her inventory. However, in terms of value, it was natural for thick materials to make more money. Human aesthetics change with the weather and environment. Thin materials are now powerless, but thick materials can still be improved. Jinmen is a hub for fabric transportation, with land routes extending in all directions and serving as the starting and ending points of waterways. The fabric from the south is transported by waterway to Jinmen, and then scattered to various northern prefectures. So, the large silk and satin shops here in Jinmen are all engaged in bulk wholesale business. The most important aspect of this business is circulation, as it puts too much pressure on money. Just like a silk and satin shop, a batch of fabrics without the right collateral will accumulate and become difficult to turn over. If the wrong collateral is placed twice in a row, there will be no place to bury oneself. The only option is to dispose of the inventory at a low price and start over from a small shop. Shen Zhaokuan has been piling up inventory for 3 consecutive years, which has long become a joke in the eyes of various silk and satin shops in Jinmen. Big merchants watch the fire from afar, while small merchants are eagerly waiting for the Shen family silk and satin shop to process their inventory, fiercely lowering prices, biting off a piece of Shen family meat, and even dividing it into smaller portions. The simplest way for the Shen family to break through this year's winter goods is to not only activate funds but also sell a batch of inventory. This way, the Shen family can survive and even regain its position as a major merchant in the silk and satin industry. Shen Shi thought that perhaps tomorrow, she would go to various silk shops for a walk. Her eyes were darkened, and she could only learn from others, speculate on this year's trends, or follow someone else to purchase and try the water. We need to wait until we have a thorough understanding of these things in the future. Shen Shi made up his mind, looked up, and found that the water in the pot had boiled to the point of turbidity. It seemed that the cooked noodles were no longer good. Shen Shi found the place where Mrs. Ma often hid mantu, took out a mantu, and made do with the water in the pot for dinner. With a sense of direction in mind, mantu tastes sweet. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. First Impressions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. First Impressions. Leave only one letter. The next day, Shen Shi woke up early because she had something on her mind. The trading of bulk goods will end soon, and she needs to go early. Last night, Shen Shi was afraid that Shen Zhaokuan would get up late and disturb his good dream, so he told his father about it in advance before going to bed last night. So now, Shen Shi gets up alone without waiting for his sisters to pack up and go out with mantu. Timely. Shen Zhaokuan's voice echoed behind her, and Shen Shi turned her head in surprise. She didn't expect her father, who usually wakes up late in the morning, to wake up specially. Looking at Shen Shi with mantu, Shen Zhaokuan's face was a little heavy. Today you go by my carriage. Lao Fu has been waiting for you at the door. The carriage is fast, and the road won't be long. You can eat at home before you go. Shen Shi looks at the mantu in her hand and smiles unconsciously. She has no resistance to caring for others. Thank you, father. I eat in the carriage. This is my first time to see the morning market. I'm worried and can't sit at home. In the early morning of late autumn, across a threshold, one cannot see their face clearly in the mist, only a hazy appearance can be seen. I don't know if it's a psychological effect, but Shen Zhaokuan felt that the blurry face at this moment was more and more similar to his mother's face. He chuckled and said, "You and your grandmother really look the same. They like to do things early. Alright, you go there. Be careful when you go there, don't push too far forward. The people coming and going there are all laborers carrying goods, and they are unreasonable when encountering people." Shen Shi nodded and felt that his father might not be able to see him, so he spoke again, I just want to see from a distance who produces more goods and whose business is good. Don't push forward. Father and daughter, one has something on his mind and the other is naturally reticent. At this moment, there is no talk left. After a while, Shen Zhaokuan waved his hand and said, "Go ahead. From the Shen family onwards, it will depend on you." Shen Shi didn't hear clearly. What does father mean? It's like entrusting something. The Shen family will depend on you in the future. Yes, the Chun family's family business will always be passed down from generation to generation. Shen Shi was puzzled for a moment, then turned his head and walked outside. In just a few steps, his figure disappeared behind the shadow wall. The teacher on the cabinet, Mr. Fu, was indeed waiting at the door. "Miss Eyre is here, let's go. You got up early enough, so we don't have to rush today." Lao Fu greeted Shen Shi warmly when he saw her. In the past, the old lady took the second lady to the counter, so as an old cart and horse on the counter, Lao Fu was no stranger to Shen Shi. But before, she was holding her in the arms of the old lady, and now she is running out on her own. When she sees her similar face and mantu in her hand, Lao Fu only feels that the Shen family still has hope, as long as it can survive this year. Old Fu has been following the old lady through ups and downs for many years, never thinking that the Shen family would not be able to survive this time. The horse whip swung its whip and the carriage wheels turned, taking Shen Shi towards the morning market in Jinmen. Shen Shi walked out of the door, and the quiet Shen family also became active. Amidst the flickering figures, they gained some of their previous popularity. Shen Shi didn't know what she was doing at home. At the moment, she was taking a mantu to the south gate with Lao Fu. It was near the dock. On large merchant ships, bare-chested coolies were sweating in the early morning of late autumn. They were unloading goods in full swing. In order not to pollute the cloth, they carried the cloth head of labor protection on their shoulders and more than 1 meter high cloth on their shoulders and walked steadily across the dock. On the other side, there were shopkeepers wearing long robes, dealing with merchants from all over the country. The merchants led a convoy, waving silver tickets, and squeezed in front of the robed shopkeeper, asking them to prioritize their shipments. Of course, in front of these shopkeepers, there are various merchants, and the popular silk and satin shops are anxiously queuing up, waving silver tickets but unable to squeeze in. Merchants who have already purchased cine goods split open their human flesh and crawled out, taking their colleagues and convoys from the bustling Jinmen port to various places. Winter is a good time for businessmen to make money every minute and second. Any ambitious businessman is striving to be the first, afraid of falling behind others and earning less money that originally belonged to them. Shen Shi stood on the carriage, at the edge of the crowd, trying to memorize the types of goods purchased by these merchants in her mind. As for those popular big merchants, there were only a few, and she had already memorized them in her mind. After a while, when the crowd dispersed, she could come and observe one by one. Jinmen dock is always so lively. Lao Fu sat on the carriage and said with some emotion. In the past, our Shen family was the leader here, and all the owners in Jinmen, big and small, had to look at our goods as shopkeepers to purchase them. This saved us a backlog of goods and we couldn't sell them for compensation. Lao Fu was reminiscing about the past, and Shen Shi couldn't help but feel heartbroken and passionate as he listened to his words. It was such a sight to be able to hold on to the ox ears of the Jinmen silk and silk manor. At present, everyone is rushing for money, and no one pays attention to Shen Shi, who is a small person with his mouth open, greedily watching as the crowd tries to join in and get a share of the pie. However, in 2 hours, with a sea of people, the bustling and boiling Jinmen dock fell silent, and the morning market came to an end at dawn. The merchants who bought the goods went back to their respective homes, while the shopkeepers in the city completed today's transaction, went back to the counter to take inventory, welcomed new goods, and prepared to work harder tomorrow. Let's go, Miss Eyre. After watching for so long, go back and rest your mind. Aren't you going to visit a few big silk and satin shops again? We don't have time to delay. Those big shops are enough for you to see for a long time. Shen Shi calmed his boiling heart and sat back in the carriage. Uncle Fu, let's go back. For a whole day, Shen Shi did not stop, eating while walking, and had Uncle Fu take him to walk through all the Dasho silk and silk villages in Jinmen. Uncle Fu, please go back first. I have to trouble you a bit these past few days. Uncle Fu's bronze wrinkles scattered on his face and he said, "Miss Eyre is so hard-working." "What's the hard work of driving for me, old master? Tomorrow at noon, I will be waiting for you at the door on time." Seeing off Uncle Fu, Shenxi walked home with an unconscious excitement and satisfaction on her face. She thought, she seems to have found the direction she is currently striving for. Turning around the screen wall, Shenxi had not yet noticed anything amiss. She was so happy today that she unconsciously overlooked the amiss in her home. It wasn't until she couldn't find anyone inside or outside that she finally realized that something had happened at home today. With a hint of premonition, Shenxi walked into the main room. Familiarly, he reached for the fire folder on the nearby antique shelf and lit the candles inside. Only then did Shenxi realize that there was a fruit tray on the dining table in the main room, scattered with a few less fresh dates. Under the tray, there was a letter written by Shenxi personally. Shenxi stared at the letter for a while before reaching out to pick it up. Undoubtedly, this is a letter of notification, which states that Shen Zhaoquan and Zhong, along with their 3 children, have gone out with their families. Of course, I also found a legitimate reason, saying that I dreamt of my parents. On the occasion of their 3rd anniversary of death, I planned to go to my hometown in the countryside to pay tribute to my parents. At the same time, I took my family on a trip to Kyoto to relax. As precious sons, Shen Songhuan and his daughter Baozhu must be taken with them. They cannot let her stay and endure hardship. The 3rd daughter, who was clever in attracting her, persuaded Songhuan to cry and bring her along. In short, they informed Su Xionyang and also told the scholar in the alley to take leave for Songhuan. With her 3 children, they had already set off for a long time. The letter emphasized once again, "Shop, it's up to you. Time is right. You have been following your grandmother since childhood and have gained her skills. When my father returns from Kyoto, I will wait to see the Shen family's silk and satin factory flourish in your hands." End of this chapter.